All right, so I'm in a room full of NFs. What the NF?
It might have
That should be the
affected
title of
you
this
guys,
video.
Janelle and
Yeah. So the idea that I had about the introduction or beginning is that we would introduce ourselves. I am host Ken. I've labeled myself host Ken. Basically, I prefer the INFJ type. As far as Enneagram goes, I believe I prefer a type 6 for Enneagram. Enneagram. Did I say that right? I think I did. Anyways, tri-type 641 or 614. Haven't quite nailed it down yet. I was prefacing that. I would like for the other participants to go through and state if they know both their type and their Enneagram to say what it is. Starting with Jonathan, if you could.
Okay. I am Jonathan. I am INFJ, 119. My tri-type is 152. I am SOSP.
Okay.
All right. I guess I'm next. Damon Gray, ENTJ. I am tri-type 837 and the mover shaker. Hopefully I shake things up with this room full of NFs. We'll see what happens, though. I might be outnumbered by the amount of NFness and all the TI floating around. But we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Trey.
Trey Farrell.
Type 5. Type 5 and X.
It can't INFP. I don't know what letter I am.
Yeah, I prefer INFJ. I'm a 512, 5-wing 4, SXSO.
Okay.
Is it my turn?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Oh. Hi, my name's Daniel. I'm an ENFJ. I'm stuck between, well, my Enneagram is 3-wing 4, but I'm stuck between my tri-type of being a 358 or a 361. So that's me.
He's all the Enneagram. He encompasses the Enneagram. He is the Enneagram.
I am the Enneagram. You can just call me Sensei.
Well, no.
So, yeah, that's not going to happen. I did
No.
forget to mention that as far as instinctual...
I am the sensei.
Okay, he is the sensei. Yeah. All in
Yes,
favor?
I-
All in favor of
All in
Jonathan
favor?
being the sensei?
Aye.
Okay, we have 3. We got a thumbs down. Kit Kats, are you in favor of Jonathan being the sensei?
I'm the troll. I'm the troll right now.
Okay, Captain.
She's got, there we go. He's the sensei, 4-2.
And the majority has voted. Motion has moved. We're good.
Yes, we're good.
And
I did forget to mention that as far as instinctual variants go, I prefer SXSP for mine.
Oh,
SXX.
I left mine out. I'm SXSP as well.
There you go. So we have that
So
in
lost.
common. Very nice.
I'm sexual
There's
social.
There's a lot of sex in this chat right now. Then
A lot of
Oh,
sex
yeah.
in this chat. It's gonna get kinda crazy.
I am the only one who is not sexy, but yet somehow the sexiest.
But in not pursuing it, you become the embodiment of it, and that's the important thing.
Yeah, you are the Enneagram, remember? You embody all sexual desire.
So, before this gets a little too whimsical to grab a hold of,
All right, let's back on track.
yeah, so one thing I was going to ask is in our introductions, if you want to share a little bit about yourselves, you can. Basically, this portion of it is just us, as we're already doing, sort of breaking the ice for the topics that we will be covering. We'll want to keep this a little bit shorter. After that, we are going to go into talking about a little bit more about our types and our Enneagram preferences. After that, we will be moving into the labels that we use and how we think that those benefit and hinder our pursuit of greater happiness. So go ahead, start with, I think myself. I'll go ahead and share a little bit about myself, and then we can go on down the line to Jonathan and then eventually Daniel. So for myself, I got interested in MBTI. Nice. Got interested in MBTI about, it was a little over a year ago. I took an online test, got INFP as a result, didn't really look into the cognitive functions. After some time, a few months, I came back, took the test again, got INFJ, thought, oh, that's interesting. Took the test again a few months later, INFP, and I said, okay, so what's going on here? And then I decided to actually get into the cognitive functions and looking into things. After several months, I ended up settling on INFJ, and in that period of time, I discovered MBTV and talking with famous people. Took me all of about 4 weeks, and Eric decided that I was host Ken, so then that is what happened. I became host Ken, and here I am after that exciting journey. So yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I actually did the MBTI test. The first time I did it was years and years ago, and I'd done similar things before, and since. And when I took it, I can't remember what I got the first time. It was either INFJ or INFP, because those are the ones I kept getting. And it was, at first it seemed to fit, and it was fine. But when I got the different results, and when I looked at the descriptions, which were just too general, I related to all the descriptions, so I thought, yeah, this is bunk, this is rubbish. So I went away. A few months later, I did it again, same thing happened. At first I thought it was good, and then I thought rubbish. And rinse and repeat over a few years. Eventually, I was prompted by a video on introverts to take it again, and I think I got INFP. And for some reason I got really, really angry this time, and I decided, no, I'm going to investigate one way or the other. What's this all about? So I started looking up videos and forums, and then I learned about the functions. And that led me to conclude INFJ, especially when I realised my brother was an INFP. It was a good contrast, or likely an INFP. And then through that I was on the forum Personality Cafe, which led me to Socionics and Enneagram, and eventually I just started buying a bunch of books on first an MBTI, then later on the Enneagram, watching a whole bunch of videos, learning all I could. I ended up going on to Ben Davies' channel. I've made about 40 odd videos by now. That was about a year ago I started. And yeah, here I am, now I'm a famous person.
There it is.
Wow.
By
I
the
don't know
way,
how to follow that
for
up.
any of you who haven't been here before,
But
oh,
Ken,
yeah, no, I was just going to say, for any of you who haven't been here before,
you're on mute, Ken. I
You're
can't-
muted. You're muted.
for any of you who haven't been here before, just by showing up, I'm sorry if you didn't want this, but you're officially a famous person. So you're famous now. So that's
I was
one thing.
already famous.
Yeah, I was. Oh, well,
There's
Okay.
no question about that.
no need to
We
get
know.
snippy with it, Jonathan, okay?
Does that mean they're
You
going to
have
take
to-
pictures of me while I'm zoned out?
Okay,
Absolutely.
but we'll get to you, Trey. Just make sure that we'll get to you.
Yeah. Go
All
ahead.
right, so everybody, if you don't know me originally, my name Chad Crandall. I started my YouTube channel about a year and a half, 2 years ago, as Chad Crandall, and in the process of doing that, I started as a result of looking. My whole life I struggled with depression and anxiety due to a pretty traumatic past. I'm pretty open about it, but there was a lot of stuff I went through. This channel is this particular topic is a very personal topic to me because it's a topic I've struggled with, and a lot of people I've known struggle with it. Some people try to repress it, hide it, whatever it may be, but anxiety and depression have been a constant companion throughout my life, even in my early years, to the point where I was looking one day randomly to figure out what the heck was wrong with me, and not in the sense of why am I so depressed, but more in the sense of why am I so weird, why am I so different. So I came across trying to find people similar, so I type in common traits in Google or whatever, looking for a lot of similar traits to myself, and then I recognized that all of a sudden I was like, I came across a profile that somehow fit me perfectly, and I said, this sounds like me, this is weird. And so as I read through the entire thing, I said, this is me. What's the deal? I never took the test first. I actually read the profiles first. And I said, well, what other profiles could there be? So I read all of them, and I was like, this one fits the most. Then I took the test, and it fit perfectly. I got the answer that obviously was a profile I identified with. So I never really had any mid-type crisis so much, trying to figure out my type or testing wrong. I tested ESTJ one time long ago, and that's just because I'm pretty practical, I guess. And so other than that, but there was for the most part, I always scored as ENTJ on pretty much every one I had taken, and so that's pretty much what it was. But I did struggle, like I said, even past that, not with type so much, but I got into other things because Myers-Briggs only explained a fraction of the entire personality profile, from temperament to personality to values to the particular things that I believe in. So I wanted to look at beyond that. I've always been into personal development since I was probably, I don't know, 12, 13 years old. And so personal development's been a big, big aspect of my life. And, so that was a big part of it, trying to look at all aspects of character. So I moved into Enneagram, I moved into, different studies of like NLP, different studies of personality, different studies of whatever I could get my hands on, I would consume material and information as much as possible, books after books after books after books. So it's been a big, long journey, and there's been a lot of battles, but as you fight through, I think anybody has the personal power to overcome challenges they're faced with, as long as they're presented with a lot of information and they open up opportunity to be presented information that helps them move forward in life. So that's the key. So keeping that up to date, I'm going to pass this on to the very, very, very famous person, Trey Farrell.
What up? That was crazy. Thanks for the introduction. So yeah, for me, I think what really happened was I just found this random thing online. I don't even know how I found it, but I found it and I took a test. And it typed me as a few things, but I stuck with ENTJ for a while because I really did identify with it at the time. And that's something that I've learned a lot about now, is that you can identify with a type. That doesn't mean that's what you would prefer to do. But I stayed in that state for a long time, and I was in a pretty pressured environment. So eventually I got out of that environment, and after that I was still in a pressured environment, just not as bad. And so I was learning a lot about MBTI, and that was thanks to Damon, actually. I remember I was actually really upset because when I started my channel, it was like right when I heard about it. I was like, oh yeah, ENTJs are rare, so I'll just make videos and I'll get followers. So so I did, and I just made a bunch of videos talking about myself. I didn't know anything about personality or anything like that. And then I was like, I don't know what I'm talking about, once I had like 100 subscribers. So I contacted Damon, and I was like, hey, could you teach me? Because you know what you're talking about and I don't. So then after a while, when I started tossing it around, we started to make a channel together, MBTV, and we started MBTV, and then recently determined that I actually preferred INFJ, and that I identify with that a lot more now because I've been able to flex a lot more and get back into my regular position as a person, and I don't really feel as pressured in my environment. So it's pretty nice being back where I'm supposed to be. And it's been a pretty crazy journey. I've learned a lot about myself, and there's an intense clarity that's come with everything that I've learned about my life and where I'm headed. So that's why I love the MBTI community.
Kit Kats, are you still with us? Hi. Can you introduce yourself, Kit Kats, and talk about how you discovered type and stuff like that?
Okay, well, my name's Kit Kats, and I actually got interested in the whole personality typing thing from, it was like during gym class or something. For some reason, they just made us take the test and just briefly mention it, and then just went over it, and I was just super interested in it once I read about it, and kind of was thinking about it since I had it. And to be honest, it was kind of almost refreshing reading something that the closest thing to explaining how I am and what I'm like, because my whole childhood I kind of felt like I was always what's the word, I never really fit in, and I really rarely found somebody that thought the same way or acted the same way or understood me, and it was kind of comforting in a way, and I just got interested in that on and off, kind of researched into it, and it was only until 2 years ago or so I kind of got more interested in reading about the other types. Mainly what I did was I just kind of read about only my type and the tendencies and problems, and I thought, okay, I'll try working on my weaknesses and problems, and that's what as a tool I used. So yeah.
Okay. Daniel,
You're up.
Oh, it's my turn.
Mm-hmm.
So I discovered MBTI by Google searching the word intuition, because when I was 16 or 17, I was like, you know, I kind of find myself to be intuitive. So I researched it, led me to a Wikipedia page about intuition, which had a link for MBTI somewhere on the page, which led me to MBTI, which led me to ENFJ, and I was like, wow, somebody wrote a story about my life. So ever since then, I've been an enthusiast to understand people better and to understand myself. I created like the philosophy for myself to that my journey in life is to kind of come back into oneness with myself and what my reason is for being here. And so anything at this point that I get my hands on, I try to utilize the practical application to explore myself and the world around me. And so MBTI has helped me a lot in understanding, you know, myself, you know, deprogramming the crap that I've been through, and helping other people along their own journey, and pretty much whatever I learn at this point, regardless of MBTI, to help others and myself, and to always kind of turn the wheel, and and just to experience life with others, which is why I'm here in this chat with famous people.
All right, I think we're honored with the amount of famous people that are in here, other than myself. I obviously am not a famous person yet. I'm following in Jonathan's suit, but let's get this topic rolling. I'm really interested in diving into the details. So I can kick it off if you want, Ken, or if you want to take it, it's up to you.
I'll take it here in a moment. One thing I wanted to bring up is throughout this, you know, as you guys are in the chat and whatnot, and while we're doing this, one thing I wanted to keep in mind is that, you know, it's fine if you're in a joking mood or whatever, you're having fun in chat, but realize because of the topic that we have going on here, I would prefer that you know, give it a minute when you're thinking about saying a joke or something like that. Keep in mind that some people may not appreciate your particular flavor of humor. Basically, just to say, try to keep things nice, because we want to respect the fact that people are coming here and that they are willing to listen to us discuss this topic. So that's definitely something.
Yes, let's talk, you motherfuckers.
Eric, now's not the time.
Okay. I was kidding. I'm just coming in to check to see if you're recording. Are you actually recording this?
I am recording, and I think you're the only famous person that I would prefer did not show up for right now. No, I'm kidding. No, you can remain here, but keep the
ENTP down.
Keep the Puesto Enrico to a minimum if you can. Okay. All right. Okay.
Oh man.
Damon, do you remember where we were going next with this?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was distracted by.
Wait, do you guys mind if I asked Trey and Jonathan a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
I want them to try to get my tri-type, because when I first actually did the test or looked at the Enneagram chart, I thought you were just supposed to pick one from each of the. And there goes each of the. I'm going to pull up
Saren.
Yeah.
Can we keep it rolling with the topic for right now? Can we save that for later?
All right. Yeah, sure. If you want to say that.
Okay.
I'll work with you later. I'll just give you my Skype name.
Yeah, I want to record this particular chunk, and then we will take a small recess.
Yeah,
that
sounds
way I
good.
can load up a different video.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. So, yeah, the next topic we were going to dive into sort of type in general a bit more, and maybe how it relates to depression, anxiety, stress, things like that. And then after that, then we will take a bit more time to discuss the labels that we use and how they benefit or hinder our sort of endeavorings to improve ourselves, sort of better know ourselves, things like that. So with that, thinking about as far as type goes, is there anything immediately on anyone's mind out of the people on camera, and if there's anyone on microphone, when it comes to type, either
Yeah, I do. The first thing that comes up into mind is like triggers, social triggers, and anxiety through fear.
Yeah.
And so a good example of this is, like, just for an example, my mom, you know, triggers me, right? And I think a lot of people could agree that our parents may have this effect on us. And so, growing up, I was, not in the best, environment. And so, even to this day, my mom can always find a way to creep under my skin and to just jump the thresholds of patience. Although I consider myself to be a very patient person with 99% of the people I interact with, between my mom and my dad and a few select others, something just kind of like it explodes out of me, right? Through like my heart or through my mind, and it kind of takes over my body as far as the energy goes. And so, and I don't know, to tie it, or maybe a separate question is how do social triggers work with our personality type maybe, and how do core fears play a role into like anxiety? Because I've noticed that I have anxiety in certain situations in my life, being a type 3. And so I would want to talk about that as well.
Okay. All right. So I think I can answer a good portion of those questions. Someone like myself who prefers extroversion. When it came to social anxiety when I was younger, it was challenged for me because of the way that I was raised and the situation that I had when I was younger, and it manifested in a way that it's been a tremendous fear of being vulnerable. And to date, I openly admit working with a particular coach to be able to work through a lot of the issues that I still have as a remnant of the effects of my past. So the childhood, I think, is the foundational shaping of our particular way of, incorporating the world. And if you include that in Enneagram, which saying these are the wounds that are healed, I think Enneagram also has a very strong spiritual element. But I think it's bigger than just psychology, of course. I think there's a huge spiritual element involved. But as far as social anxiety goes, this was a huge problem for me in my youth. I mean, to the point where I couldn't even talk to people. I had this desire. I wanted to talk to people, so I was very lethargic the very early years of my life, all the way until about 14 years old. Very lethargic. I had zero social skills, zero. And it was because I never talked to people. I avoided conversation. I tried to communicate, but I would be overwhelmed with so much anxiety to where my body was shaking, my hands would shake, my face would flush, I would be overwhelmed with so much fear because of the abuse that I had been exposed to in my early years. So, and I thought that everybody was out to hurt you, and so this comes out with a fear of vulnerability, as Enneagram 8 even more importantly, being that victim my entire life, almost like a victim-like mentality of being, everybody had this particular angle of trying to come after me or to take you down, and that's the view. And so I was talking with my coach the other day, and I told him, I said, he said, you have a worldview where everybody's out to get you. Everybody has some kind of they want to take you down. They want to fight you. They want to take you down. They want to hurt you. They want to pierce you. And so you don't want to give people information. You don't want to give people information on, your ability to be anything. You don't want to give anybody any vulnerable information where they can one-up you. You don't want that. So, and I say you as an I in my particular example. So when I talked to my coach and I was telling him this, he said, that's interesting. So you have a filter. You have this view of the world that everybody's out to hurt. He goes, that does happen in the world. But how many people do you actually think have this desire to control you? And I really thought about it. I said, logically, probably not that many. And he said, you're right, there's not. He's like, but the worldview you have right now. So I asked him a follow-up question. The follow-up question was this. I said, so where do you separate it then? I mean, at what point do you give people information or ammunition to take you down? At what point is it okay to start giving people information? At what point is it okay to be vulnerable? And he goes, well, you can't answer that right now. And I said, so what's the difference between being naive and just giving people information about yourself to where they're going to crush you? And he goes, actually, your worldview is really naive. He's like, it's like a child. You see everybody as a enemy. And he's like, and it's a childish view of the world. And it kind of hit me pretty hard. He said, you see the world like a child. And he's like, a child that's afraid of people, and a child that's afraid to be hurt. And he's like, and so your worldview is problematic. And so he goes, and that's where he's like, you've built this armor to appear so strong in the world. But he goes, in reality, he goes, you're a very innocent child. And so we've talked about the holy idea of Enneagram. We've talked about those things, and the holy idea is innocence. And so it links back to really linking this together and seeing, he's like, you have this sense of innocence to you, and you've built up such a thick armor that you allow no one to do that to you. So for me, it was very eye-opening to see how naive I really was, because I thought I had all the experience now. I was like, okay, I've been through this. I know how this is. I see the way people are. I see what it is. He goes, you are looking through a very, 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 very thick filter. He goes, it's so naive. He goes, and you build up this armor to where you think that you have the way to navigate the world, and you think that you have this. But he goes, in reality, he's like, you don't have it. He's like, you don't have a mature worldview at all. He's like, but if you can accept that, that's the beginning. Now you got to watch how it plays a role into your life. He goes, look how you start seeing things. So my assignment has been over the past week is to really recognize areas in which I wish to that I'm seeing these control attachments. And we have these psychological attachments called, we have the rejection attachment, we have the deprivation attachment, we have the control attachment. And these attachments play a role into our lives, and we're kind of rooted down. And that's where we have this real big issue with it. So when we start identifying the role that these attachments play in our life, we can start seeing how they manifest a filter in which we see the world. So if the filter goes, hey, everybody, I see everybody as this horrible person that's going to take me down, so that's all I'm going to see. So when any experience I'm exposed to, I'm just using that to further my belief that that actually exists, instead of actually looking at it. Because I've mentioned this several times in my live shows as well. If you're in the market for a red car, you're going to start seeing a lot more red cars. Well, if you're in the market of playing victim and thinking that everybody's out to get you, you're going to start seeing a lot more people out to get you. You're going to start surrounding yourself with people who are out to get you to further justify that particular worldview. And the next thing you know is you built a fortress of seeing the world a certain way, when in reality that's not the case. And this is called a meta program that we have, and we put these programs up to see a certain way. And all we do is have to recognize the grip that these programs have in our life, and they grip us into these experiences. And you can imagine, once you start seeing the anxiety come to fruition because you've built up such an armor, you lack human connection, you lack human relationships, and the worst part about it is it's paradoxical, which means that in order, for example, if you have a control attachment, you hate control. You don't want people to control you, but that attachment actually, ironically, if I flip this over to, say, a rejection attachment, it's easier to explain. If you're afraid of rejection and you're afraid of being that, you're going to go to a party or show up, and you're naturally going to start isolating yourself to make that attachment true. And so you keep doing that over and over and over and over again. It's the very thing that you're trying to avoid is actually what you're creating. And this is the truth for all these attachments. So, it goes beyond the psychological dimension. It goes into a very spiritual dimension too. What influence does this have? And we can't attack this from a purely psychological standpoint. I can't give you a to-do list and go, here's how to solve anxiety. What you have to do is grow yourself physically, grow yourself mentally, grow yourself spiritually. And if you can do this successfully and continue pressing forward through life in the way of being able to work with people and create better relationships, you're going to find people who can really be open with you. And taking the step and investing in my coach as far as financially and emotionally was a very hard thing for me, especially telling him some of the darkest things of my past that I've never told anybody before. So it's really, really important that you learn to recognize things and be totally open to hearing that type of feedback from people you trust. And that was a huge step in helping me relieve a lot of the anxiety. And I can tell you, after 2 or 3 days of letting it kind of sit and doing a little bit of my homework and recognizing things, the anxiety that I naturally feel has dissipated over 75%. So just doing that, just recognizing how that filter plays a role in my life, and seeing that. We all have filters. Every single person has a meta filter. Can you imagine if you didn't have a meta filter in your life, and all the information that you're exposed to in every given second, they say it's like 11 million bits of information if you convert it to digital currency or digital information, it's like 11 million bits. We have to have filters. But what role is that filter playing? Right?
One thing I wanted to bring up, the information you're given is great, and going into that, we were talking about how, going off of that, it's like, I know that I've been in a place, like, mentally, where if you were to say that to me, and you were to say, well, my anxiety has gone down like 75% saying these different things, what you're saying, I think, is accurate. But I remember being in a place to where if you were to say that to me, I'd clam up. and I wouldn't necessarily be willing to accept that information. I think that's one of the hard things is that, either I was talking about Enneagram and type, but really it's more than that. It's like
Right.
these ideas that we have that, that person's different from me, or something like that, to where it's like the information can't be trusted. So it's like even if somebody's trying to help you, the state of mind that you're in is not allowing you to take on better information.
There's not a single solution that is a magic bullet for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, that's my experience. That's what happened to me, even helping me recognize that. But again, different people have different attachments. Different people have different problems. I have the answer for everyone, and it's this particular model, or it's this system. It's what worked for me. What I do know is that we all have programs, meta programs in place to see certain things in the world, whether they're positive or negative. There's an optimism meta program, and then there's a negative meta program. How do you see the world? Do you see the world in optimistic, and how do you support that optimism throughout the day? You can get two people looking at the exact same situation. One's going to see the half glass full, or the glass half full, and the other one's going to see the glass half empty. And that's just the natural thing of, these are all meta programs. And so you can change them, you can alter them, you can change those experiences based on what it is. But some of them are necessary. I mean, obviously, if you think there's a necessary fear that you have to have, like, oh, don't put your hand on the stove. When you see a stove, you have the impulse to put your hand. That's a good program to have, to go, I'm not going to put my hand on the stove, right? So you want to have those programs. They're necessary for human psychology. It's just, is it playing a negative thing in your life? Is it affecting you, or is it not? And these are things that you're going to have to sort out, really, ultimately, to yourself. And in no way, shape, or form, Ken, to further elaborate what you were saying was what I was implying, that this will help everyone. It helped me.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the key, is really understanding what your particular thing is. I have done everything. I mean, I went to psychiatrists, psychologists. I've been all over the place. I've talked to people around the world. I've done everything to fix this constant background depression, anxiety issue, the majority of my life, from being a kid to being my teenager years, which even got worse, to now being a full-grown adult and still dealing with it. I said, that's it. I'm sick of this governing my life. I said, I'm sick of it. It's whatever I have to do. I will pay endless amounts of money to get this problem solved. I don't care anymore. And so that was the attitude I took. It's like, this needs to be gone. It's hamstringing me. And this is a big key to what we call self-sabotage. And so anxiety is a huge issue, but also I've been attached to anxiety because it motivates me. If I feel that anxiety, I'm like, let's go. So he said you like your own anxiety, right? He said you like the fact that you're attached to it because it gave me motivation. Whereas anxiety for other people doesn't necessarily give them motivation, but what it does is it helps them identify, that's who I am. I am my anxiety. Some people like that idea of having a special condition, or an idea of having a disadvantage to justify something. Or some people may have it as another motivational tool for something else. For me, anxiety does motivate me. When I can't relax, okay? So maybe this is because my SI is my polar function, but I couldn't relax. I can never relax. I don't even know what relaxing means to date. I still don't know what relaxing means. And so when I'm trying to relax, I have a background voice that's like, get your ass up and do something. You've got to accomplish something. You've got to move forward. You cannot sit here and waste time. And that's anxiety. It will not allow me to relax. So instead, I'm like, okay, I can only do this for about 20 minutes, and then I got to go do something. So to answer your question, Creeper, yes, anxiety does motivate me in the way of doing things. For some people, it wears them out. And for me, it wears them out. I have a zero-tolerance policy, essentially, for conflict or things that irritate me, because I have a background anxiety that I'm fighting with every day. And so when conflict comes my way, I tend to hit it full force. I hit it as hard as possible, and I hit really hard. And I don't mean to, and I can really hurt people in the process. And it's caused a stress on a lot of the relationships I've had, and it comes out in the way it shouldn't come out. And I look at it and I go, that's anxiety coming out, and coming out in a very aggressive way. So I've been working on that, trying to get through that. So that being said, I've talked a lot. I will toss the floor over to someone else.
Jonathan, Daniel, Kit Kats, I don't know what happened to Trey. If you guys have something relating to, because I feel like when he was mentioning SI and how he doesn't know what relaxation is, I thought that was something important to hit on. In what you guys have learned about type, have you identified certain things about personality or something like that? It's like, oh, that's what my problem is, so to speak. Daniel?
I have when it comes to that. You know, I've done a lot of work, personal work on understanding how, you know, the cognitive functions play a role in my everyday life and how it ties to this idea of anxiety and stress and, you know, dysfunctionality, if that's a word, with my life. And so what Damon was saying about SI was so spot on. You know, it's, you know, sometimes I struggle with some of these areas of my life, maintaining health and being polar and being on and off with my own general health, and on and off between, you know, my preferences of, you know, self-analysis and getting out there and talking to people in the real world, and, you know, maintaining friendships in a healthy way. And so, you know, I struggle a lot with a lot of internal, I wouldn't say motives. I guess you would call them motives, where, you know, I value certain things over others. And so a good example of that is, I know that I'm a very sociable person, and though for me, I think it's not personally necessary to always socialize as much as I want to, because there's other things that need to be done, right? Or the fact that when I'm working, right, as kind of Damon says that, you know, he always needs to work, you know, I always have that drive. I can always never stop, and that, you know, Damon can speak for me when I say, like, you know, if I see that something needs to be done with MBTV, I'll just hammer it out like 24-hour shifts, and like I'll just relentlessly do something until it's done, and I'll be driven to do certain tasks like that have to do with something like very trivial but needs to be done, right? Like anything YouTube driven, or, you know, anything that has to be done with, you know, like one task over time. Like I'll be really into getting things done, and like for me it's hard to say, all right, why don't I just stop for 10 minutes or half an hour, meditate, and get back to this? Why can't I just meditate every day like I really want to, and stuff, and like do this, like there's this drive in the subconscious, I guess, back end of me that just says you need to always do this, and do this, and it goes into how Damon ties it into like our overall values, I guess, of the world, and, you know, how we perceive the world. And so I've always kind of seen certain areas, you know, between friendships, between success, between personal growth in certain ways, you know, and I've always been personal growth driven. I've always identified at a really young age that something was off with me, and that I want to always explore myself and grow as a person, and to, you know, just kind of pursue those agendas, because, you know, I try to stay really aware of these things, and that's why I do the work that I do, is to always self-actualize and participate with other people who understand the journey like Damon and everybody else here does. So, let's say about that.
I want to give the other two introverts that we have on camera time to add anything if they want to, because I'll probably have this sectioned off as a video, and then after we're done discussing this, because I want to make sure that we discuss this properly. Once we get to the end of this, then I will cut the end of this video and then take a brief hiatus, and then we'll start again, make another one, run that for a bit. So Jonathan or Kit Kats, if you have something that you felt like you wanted to add. No, not particularly.
Sorry.
Kit Kats, you want to add something?
Well, I'm not really sure if it comes in with like the whole typology theories, but one thing I notice is after a while, if I'm just like almost in a rut and I kind of get in this like down kind of state, I notice that usually I tend to feel better when I do like SE things, or like just something, even if it's like something not creative or whatever it is, like cleaning or doing things I'm supposed to do. It's like I have a sense of like, oh, at least I did something, and it makes me feel better. And also another thing with my stress and anxiety, I'm not sure why, but like when I like draw and stuff, people ask me, oh, how long did it take you to draw that? To be honest, it would take me months, or like I'll go over it for a year. It's not that it's not finished, but I would just meticulously go over every little detail, and for some reason it was like a way for me to shut my brain off and kind of just focus on instead of thinking about whatever is stressing me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if that relates to something. I don't really fully understand the
It
functions.
it kind of does, but it almost sounds like it's something that you were doing in place of confronting the thing that was going on. It was like, which I'm not saying that doing the artwork's bad, but I do something similar with, I feel like NI-TI loops. It's like I'll feel like I get into this sort of, okay, I need to build a model. I need to think about, okay, that there's something going on out here. There's these possibilities. I need to try to figure out what's the secret. How's this work? Stuff like that. I'll sit there up in my head. Meanwhile, like there's like when I had hair, the birds would come make a nest and stuff like that, and then they'd fly off. It's just that sort of idea. It's like seasons could pass, snow's on my head, and then it melts, things like that. It's like the idea that I'm like tuning out of the environment and what's going on so that I can sort of bastion myself up in my own head. And with like an Enneagram 4 preference somewhere in my tri-type, I notice I do have a tendency to go into a more creative side of things where I'm thinking of, oh, what if I had like a superpower or something like that? I get into these ideas of like what if, and I enjoy exploring that. The issue is, once I'm done, I come back and the problem's still there. So that's one of the issues.
For me, it's like I have whatever the thing is that's stressing me that I have to do, or something I'm waiting on, or something I can't immediately do something about. So then I procrastinate with like an idea, or I'll suddenly just get a bunch of ideas of things I want to do. And instead of just trying to do the thing that I'm trying to procrastinate with, or the main problem, I'm just sitting thinking about it, and just hours pass, and I just do nothing. So I don't know. It's like, for me, it's better if I just do something, and then there's a better chance I'm going to face the thing I'm originally worried about.
And I definitely like to talk about that later. That'll be part of another video that we do. Right now we're kind of focusing on type and Enneagram a little bit,
yeah.
Which is fine. I don't know if you had anything else you wanted to share.
I think that's it.
Okay. One thing I wanted to bring up is that for those of you who aren't talking when you're monitoring the chat, the way I have this set up, I'm not checking chat a lot because I'm filming it and I have to do it. Like if I pop that up, then I'll keep popping up every time. So for those of you monitoring the chat, if somebody has a question or something like that, if you could bring it up, that way we can talk about it, because I don't want to exclude people who are using the chat if they have questions. Or if there's something you read that you think's interesting, somebody said that maybe you can bring that up. So I kind of wanted to hit a little bit more. Thanks, Creeper. I kind of wanted to hit a little bit more on type and Enneagram, because I feel like I've had a tendency, especially when I was first learning about typology, to be like, oh, those types of people, those SJs, that stuff like that, where it's like, what was it? It's like with type that you can sort of develop a bias in a way, and this is kind of moving into the next topic, which was these labels that we use and how we can use them to our benefit and how we can sort of use them negatively. I noticed that for myself, I wanted to talk a bit about how when I use labels like type, like INFJ or something like that, or when I'm relating to sensors or with Enneagram, especially when I was first learning about them, I had a tendency to use them almost as justifications for certain behavior. It didn't last long for me, but I definitely see how it could become an issue, especially if you go in with a mindset. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, I actually, on my old channel, ENFJ Discussions, I was actually trying to tackle this topic when I was first learning about MBTI and typology. So I realized that not only was I an ENFJ, but then there were opposing temperaments that, like, I just had such an issue communicating with. And so, but part of my mission generally, just in my nature, is to understand how to communicate better with people. At the time, I was actually working at a car dealership. I've worked at several car dealerships, but that particular one was very hard for me to work at because I was surrounded with SJ types, STJ types. That was it. right? And then some SFJs. And so, I had a bias towards sensors at that time because I'm like, oh, cool, I'm learning about typology, and look at this, I'm thrown into the fire with all these SJs. And so, and I'm not kidding, man. Every SJ you can think of, the temperament, but totally unhealthy, they work at car dealerships. So if you want to know where they go, that's where they go. But the idea is that it was really hard for me to grasp the essential nature that every type has. I already knew at that point that I had to look at every type very objectively in terms of what every type offers to the world and to others. And so I already understood that, but personally, I grew up in a time where I've always had that resistance to sensors through experience, and that just I grew this thick skin working with sensors. And eventually they grew on me, and I eventually understood them through a lot of just working with them, talking to them, understanding it not to take things personally, understanding that their ideologies are more based on practical approaches to not only the work life but to the personal life, and I learned a lot from MBTI in that route. But I had a lot of struggle, and sometimes 10% of the time I still do, when it comes to talking to sensor types, because there's so much of a translation that I need to be mindful of.
And
that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's something to cover there. It's like, because I've had that with my idea of what I think ENTJs or ESTJs are like. And it was actually interesting because an example of this is last night I was talking to Damon, and I started asking him questions about TE and stuff like that, because I had it in my mind that TE was like this scary thing. People who were like TE dominant, I didn't really want to mess around with them, things like that. I just viewed them as kind of, I viewed TE, if I could associate a word with it, I'd use the word draconian to associate with TE.
What is draconian?
Draconian is like, just like
authoritarian.
Ruthless authoritarian, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But no, it was interesting because this idea that I had about, these ESTJs and ENTJs, they act like this. It wasn't based on relationships I had with ESTJs and ENTJs. It was based on my fear of what that could mean. It was I turned TE into my boogeyman, basically, is what it was. So, and then I was talking to, what? Go ahead.
No, I did the very same thing, but in my nature where I live near New York City, so there's always MBTI meetups, so I get to meet ENTJs, ESTJs.
Right.
And then in the sales environments that I've worked in, I had a very short window of that, of what they were like in my mind versus seeing them in reality. Mm-hmm. And Trey actually goes through a similar process that you do, where he understands Enneagram to a really high degree. He understands MBTI, but because of his age and not getting out there and just being able to go to an open forum networking event or MBTI event where, you have a label on somebody that you see, like, oh, cool, he's an ENTJ or he's an ENFP and he's an ESTJ. Oh, I want to talk to him about this, right? It's like getting that real world dynamic, right? That applying factor to it. And that's what frustrated me about MBTI is when I learned all this stuff, I was like, great, but I want to meet people now who exhibit this behavior.
Okay, so I will say this. Trey had plenty of that experience in high school. I think that was a little misconception. So I would say that he had a lot of that experience and exposure because he knew about MBTI in high school, and he was around a lot more people than most of us are around. If you think about high school in general, 500 other students, he had plenty of exposure. So I think that was a little misnomer on your part on saying that he didn't.
No, I meant in the sense of knowing what somebody's type was and then exploring.
Obviously any MBTI enthusiast is going to go in and start typing people as soon as they learn about it. And that's just the normal reaction, and we don't condemn them for that. But I think ultimately, your point I agree with. I'm just saying Trey was not a perfect example of that because he did get that exposure. I do want to say this though, is that the labels that we do attach to MBTI tend to put us in a position where, number one is we've got to make sure we, A, get back to the point, which is anxiety and depression. So let's not focus too much on type, even though type does play a role. But B is that when we think of type, let's transfer this back to anxiety, and let's transfer this back to depression. Okay, so when we get into the type talk and we're talking about particular people's type, and we're saying that this person's an ENTJ, and I've talked about this earlier, and I said we had meta programs. If I think that Trey is an ENTJ, I am going to see the characteristics that associate Trey with ENTJ. If I think Trey is an INFJ, I am going to see the characteristics that associate him with INFJ. So if we translate this particular thing back to anxiety and depression, and you see the world in this X view, whatever it may be, okay, so my view is that I think that these people are going to hurt me, or these people are, aggressive, or these people want to get one up on you, or whatever it may be. I think it's important that we realize these filters that we have in place to be able to withdraw those particular pieces of information back to create the conditions that we suffer from. So when we have these labels, or we kind of generalize all these things into not necessarily negative things, but we have to remember that these natural responses of anxiety and depression actually have a positive intention behind it. It's hard for people to accept that. Okay, the body is designed to have a reaction to a particular thing. So think about anxiety. Anxiety is generally your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight. It's kicking up into gear. It's ready for some type of fight mode, right? So when we look at it this way and we say, okay, what is that for? What's the positive intention? It's a responding stimulus to protect you, generally speaking. And anxiety is some kind of protection mechanism. It has a positive intention. What you have to identify is what is it protecting you from. And so instead of looking at anxiety like, oh, it's a horrible thing, we cast it in this negative light. Yes, it can be horrible, but it can also be helpful in particular situations. But we've got to remember the scope in which it's used. So we have real big issues with this generalization, attaching labels to everything. And we have this problem in typology, but we also have this problem in the psychological field. Obviously, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. This is my own interpretation of reading a bunch of stuff on the particular topic and looking at it in ways that, from obviously my experience, and looking at it in ways of dealing with myself and attaching labels to it because you get X benefit or Y benefit. So if we use anxiety as our crux, our default, or a strategy to approach a particular situation, or the way that we approach relationships is, I'm only going to give you this little bait on this hook. How do you respond to that? And then if you're looking at it through a filter, you're going to see what you want to see. What is it you want to see? Do you want to see people really hurt you? You're going to either withdraw that. Because if I take it and I look back, and I look back at my interactions with many different relationships I've had and many different people I've been involved with throughout the years, I realized that I am the cause of the destruction of those relationships. And maybe I'm not the sole cause. Maybe it was both parties looking through their own filters. But I recognized that a lot of it is I saw what I wanted to see, which was this person is out to hurt me. So I responded in ways that were not appropriate necessarily for that particular situation. And it's really unfortunate because you burn these bridges years throughout your life, and you're not aware of these programs that we put up, and we start doing these things. And I saw what I wanted to see. I saw aggressive people. I saw everyone is out to try to just cut you down. And so, I see, and this is, I guess, the negative part of the Enneagram, and I'm sure Jonathan has a lot to contribute to this particular aspect, but it's the really negative part of it, and it's the filter and program that I put up dealing with this particular thing, and it's been a real pain because we can look at it in this way and we can start seeing the effect it has on our relationships and the effect it has in our life if it has this kind of grip on you. So I'm not a fan of labels. In fact, when I was diagnosed with all kinds of whatever they diagnosed me with, I don't even remember what they diagnosed me with back when I was seeing a physician. But whatever they diagnosed me with, I didn't really care about the names. I said, what's the solution? It's not about labeling it and categorizing me into a group to use it as a crux for me or some kind of situation for me to do that. And I'm not saying that, this is the case for all people. This is my way of interpreting this. And I said, okay, well, I need a solution. And they're like, well, you can do these meds. I said, no, that's not a solution. This was caused by something in my past, and it's going to be fixed. Well, they didn't provide me a solution, so I decided to start my own journey of trying to repair myself. And that's what the last 12, 13 years in my life has been. And I was 16 when that all started really coming to fruition. I'm hitting a bigger point here. And when I was 16, that's when it started. And I will say this, and this is probably a strong correspondent, but I have not had a romantic relationship since 16 years old. I'm now 28. Okay, so if you can see the correlation, 16 is when that all hit, and then ever since, I've never had a romantic relationship. Now, I've dated a lot, but how was I sabotaging these dates? What was I doing? What were the actions that were manifesting from a deeper subconscious level? What programs were I following? What strategies was I following since? What direction was I going? So these are the things we've got to recognize. I don't think it's coincidence. I think it's a program that I've written, and it's a story that I'm following. And so this is what one of the purposes of MBTV is, to really help you identify these in yourself, and not to provide you with the solution, but help you find the resources for the proper solution. So I want you guys to really, get some value from different people's perspective here, and realize that everybody's story is their own, and there's not a magic bullet. There's absolutely not that. But I can tell you that don't give up. Don't just settle for a label. Don't quit. Stand up. And I can tell you, I spent an hour with Ken talking to him last night, and we talked about different things, and various topics. And the point is, I know that he's willing to help. I know, and I hope he knows that I'm willing to help. And the idea is that we're all here, and this is a community, and it's a community. This is the MBTV group, and this is the Talking with Famous People group, but it's actually a group of people navigating their way through the world and being able to come together and resolve their own issues with each other, and be able to open up and go, here's the problems that we have, here's the things that we face. And we can start bringing each other together and realizing that we actually can start trusting each other a lot more than I originally anticipated, thinking that everybody was out to get me, right? It's not a paranoia. It was just, I'm going to build up an armor so nobody can, and I will not allow people to do that. And instead, as you can see over the last few months, I've been a little more open about these experiences and things that I've dealt with, and I think it's really important that you guys start being able to do that, being able to share, and being able to get some insight from other people. Of course, there are people that are out to do that, and I'm not perfect. I am not one to have someone just interject their advice into my life. Like Ken says, he closes down. I usually meet them with equal and opposite or even greater force. So there's all different approaches, a way to do it, but I think if we work as a collaborative unit and decide that we can all kind of trust each other, at least just this group of 18 people here, we can actually start coming together and realizing that there are people with different perspectives who can offer those particular things, and we can move past a lot of these issues. Just don't quit. Don't give up. Don't settle for a label. That's my whole thing is, don't settle for something that I have this and that's it. I was talking to my coach the other day, and he said that, he's worked with PTSD people for the last 20-something years, and he said, he goes, Damon, you got a really, really bad case of PTSD. And I was like, really? I'm not even aware of it. I mean, I've been told that, but I'm not even aware of it. And he said, yeah, you do. So we're going to have to do this different approach. We're going to have to do this modality of therapy to really work through this. And if you see the cycle, for a lot of people, he said, now, this particular method, which is EMDR, he said singularly is the most effective method for PTSD. He's like, in fact, that's probably its only scope. He's like, he doesn't really help with anything else in his experience. And I said, okay, I'm willing to try it. See, now here's the complexity of the whole situation, and this is what I'm talking about when we talk about individual differences. The complexity of the difference here is that EMDR didn't work for me. Why didn't it work for me? Because I actually had a filter that prevented EMDR from working. So I built up layer after layer after layer after layer, and he goes, well, that kind of fell flat. He goes, we're going to have to figure out why you're not letting it work. I did not let the EMDR work subconsciously. And why was that? Because he identified that I have a vulnerability problem. In order for EMDR to work, you have to open up. And he couldn't get to me. He wouldn't let me open up. I was not willing to open up, and I tried. I really tried, but I couldn't do it. And so it was me meeting myself and seeing the child that's the inside of me. And that was a very scary thing. It was a very scary, and during the whole conversation, he was very professional, and he was like, hey, he goes, you're not going to like what I'm going to tell you to do next. He goes, you're really going to hate it, actually. He's like, so this is going to suck. He goes, I know you know if you're going to suck it up. But he's like, I'm just going to let you know it's going to really suck. And so, granted, he generated, I went through a range of anxiety during this particular thing, trying to navigate the labyrinth of my mind. In my mind, my labyrinth is going to be a lot different than Ken's labyrinth or Jonathan's labyrinth or Daniel's labyrinth. It's all going to be different. And we're not limited just to type. Yes, it plays a role. Yes, Enneagram plays a role. Enneagram's a lot about the childhood wound, about what happened as a child. But there's a lot more to it. There's a spiritual element. There's a psychological element. And the type is just a beginning and starting point. I know Ken wants something to say, so Ken, I see it in your eyes.
Yeah. Something I wanted to touch on. I really do see typology and Enneagram as starting points. Something I wanted to say was, when I said that I identify as the 641 tri-type, here recently I've had times where I will express almost as a 7, where it's like, I'm not saying I know there's specific integration paths and things like that, but what I'm trying to say is I'll display almost as a different Enneagram type. I might be driven to do something, more like you might expect from a 3. I might be confrontational like you might expect from an 8 in some ways. And it's like, if you were to ask me, what's your tri-type? I say, well, it's probably 641. But it's like, oh, but you're expressing these other things. It's like, yeah, to me it seems like it's a starting point. Or when I think about being an INFJ, it's like, somebody might say that, oh, you're, those INFJs, it's like, you're bad at, SI or TE or something like that. Yes, Daniel?
I don't know if anybody's going to get this reference, but it totally embodies this idea through metaphor. Does anybody know the game Age of Empires?
I'm not sure.
Okay, it's a strategy game. And so the idea, this whole topic is based off of the idea is that when you first, it's a strategy game, right? Where it's a bird's eye view. You can control military and units and stuff. But the idea is that when you first start in this game, the whole map on the little square at the bottom to see the map is black. And there's only like a certain area that's bright around you. And the map you have to explore to see where the other enemies are. So the idea is that I think that this topic is embodying, right, this idea that, right, all these different typologies and areas of growth, it puts us into like a really small area of understanding, and then that underneath that we have to explore the fuller map of ourselves understanding these ideas and growing and just journeying through life, right? And there's like this huge black area that Damon's experiencing now that he's going through, with a coach, and that everybody goes through, where it's like, all right, cool, I'm an ENFJ, cool, I'm a type 3. But then like underneath that understanding, there is like so much area to cover, right, with that application of,
and
right?
Going off
and what that evolve into.
And going off that game metaphor that you're talking about with that, where you have like enemies and things like that, I think the problem is that you have a lot of times someone who's starting out in life and they encounter a lot of enemies, or very specific enemies, and then within their scope they have this idea that, oh, there's just enemies waiting out there for me, but they haven't explored enough, they haven't gone through life enough to realize that there's allies out there waiting for them.
Yeah, like that's the idea, like in these games, like that's how it works. There's allies and enemies on the board, but you'll never explore the scope of your consciousness and explore the scope of the world without exploring outside that circle of awareness that you start off with. So a lot of people get turned off, I feel like, when they don't want to explore outside that white area.
There's like a double sort of, I'm not sure what to call it, but something going on working in opposite directions, kind of, where it's like, I believe this is a quote by Carl Jung. I'm not sure, but I think so. I'll just run with it. The quote that it's like I believe it's those who look outside themselves dream, those who look within themselves awake. I think it's interesting how, sort of to find inner peace, you do have to look inside yourself, but simultaneously you have to go out into the world and experience people and experience new experiences and things like that. But there's this sort of double effect going on where it's like, not only are you putting yourself out there into the world, you need to understand yourself as a person in this sort of grand play that's going on out there in the world. So with type and Enneagram and things like that, that's kind of the point I'm trying to get across is that it's like I see Enneagram, or I see INFJ as starting points, and I definitely see how there's useful information that I wouldn't have come to on my own, maybe not in the time frame, maybe I would have eventually come to a realization later, but it's like reading things about Enneagram and being like, oh yeah, that sounds like me, and then having somebody else who's gone through something similar, there's enough there, while it may not be the path that's perfect for me. There's enough there that I'm like, oh, I can use that, and then I sort of add that to my bank of knowledge, and then I can, go out and do more, and experience more, and not be so afraid. It's a shift that I'm trying to change in my mind, where I'm not seeing other people as potential problems, but potential opportunities. Because I've spent a lot of time inside myself, so I need to explore more, and I'll be helped out more by that, by, seeing interaction with people as a more positive thing, rather than, oh, I need to be afraid of this. And it's been helpful. I don't know if anyone else had something that they wanted to add on this.
There's a philosophy.
What was that?
I said I always have stuff to add, but I'm just trying to.
We got 3 others here, and I just want to make sure that they're, and also the people in the chat, if there's been any questions. Yeah. Trey, Jonathan, Kit Kats, if you have something you want to add, if somebody in the chat has a question, I want you guys to bring that up so that we can talk about it. So I don't know.
I have a thought.
That's surprising.
So I think that earlier when Damon was talking about armor and stuff, what happened?
I said no surprise. You have a thought, a realization. Anyway,
keep rolling.
Yeah. Well, earlier when Damon was talking about armor and putting up this front and this something that's supposed to protect you. I think that a lot of people use typology as a whole, or at least in the MBTI community, use typology as something to identify with, as some kind of like cover or armor or front. Because a lot of people, it's not necessarily. I think that a lot of people will run to this description as something to identify with, because like Damon said earlier, he was saying that for him, anxiety motivates him, right? Or it was something that he used, or that's the effect it had on him, right? But then, because he felt like he needed to go. But then for other people, it's something they can identify with by saying that I identify with having anxiety. You know what I mean? And I feel like that a lot of people need to identify with something else outside of them. And that's why we have a lot of people in the typology community who really want to, who just want to identify with something. But really, like you were saying before, Ken, about looking within yourself, you said it was a possible Carl Jung quote. What did you say? What was the looking within yourself causes what?
Those who look outside themselves dream, I believe is what it was, and those who look within themselves awake was the phrase. I may have butchered it, It sounds nice.
It does sound nice, and I was going to use it for my point. It sounded so nice. Just saying that, looking within yourself is really what I think we all need to do in the typology community, because a lot of us are looking outside ourselves for these descriptions and things we can identify with. But in order to awake and understand ourselves, I think it's important just to look within yourself. It's not that hard. It's like all the content that people are looking for outside of themselves. It's great and everything. It's good information. But a lot of the reasons that some of them are doing it is because they want to identify with something. But the best way to identify with something is to look at yourself, because that's your identity. So if you it's all the good contents within yourself. And I just think it's important that a lot of us recognize.
I think you muted. Trey, your sound went.
Oh, that was weird. Okay, sorry. Maybe the reasons that we want to look outside ourselves is to identify with these descriptions and these traits. But I think it's important that those of us who are doing that in the community, because I'm not saying it's all of us, but I think that there are some out there who just want to identify with something and just want to find some kind of security in that. And maybe if we can look within ourselves instead, we can have a lot more confidence with who we are as people.
Well, I think that's important, and it's like I see benefit in both, looking inside yourself and looking out to have support. So when people say that they're identifying with something, I've had a benefit identifying as an INFJ, talking to other people who are like INFJs, and I also realized fairly quickly on that I also really enjoy talking to these other people that are of this different type, because I'm noticing with the INFJs, we're kind of similar. So in some ways, that's a good thing, because then you can sort of bounce ideas off of them. So intellectually, it's like, or maybe not even intellectually, it's like, when it comes to feelings or things like that, they're sort of on a similar wavelength already. But then also with these people of other types or different Enneagrams, you're like, oh, I see them operating in a way with something that I don't necessarily have myself. I kind of want that perspective. That's how, I've sort of approached it, or seen it. And this isn't like I just walked in on the scene, with my Enneagram type and my, INFJ status or something like that, and I just had it all figured out, and now I'm just telling everybody their business. It's like, some of this stuff, it's like with the TE thing I was talking about, that was a realization I came to last night talking with Damon. It's like, so it's continual. It's not like, okay, I've arrived, now I can start doing things. This is something, this might seem slightly off topic, but it's something that host Eric had said before that I really agreed with and I wanted to come up with. It's this idea that you already need to be successful before you can try. And it's an idea that sort of is a little too prevalent in our society and, various places in sort of the schemas of the way that people think. It's like this idea that it's like, that failure is not appropriate somehow. It's something to learn from. Obviously, when you fail, you're like, oh, I don't really want to repeat that. But sometimes, having that failure, having that dichotomy, having that difference is imperative so that you can learn and that you can grow. Daniel.
You are totally right. And being an entrepreneur in my own way, I've noticed how many people are so afraid of failure to achieve their own dreams. But not only that, but psychologically, right? We have these personal cycles we go through, and a lot of the people that I either work with or talk to, a lot of people go through similar situations over and over again, and they don't learn from these situations, so they repeat. And they always say why do I keep experiencing this kind of person in my life, or why do I always end up in these relationships, or why do I always end up breaking my arm and going to the hospital? It's like, there's this comfort in the cycles we put ourselves through, right? And there's an idea of being more aware for that main reason, right? To say to yourself that failure is not only, it's needed, it's necessary, but it's appreciated, and that it should be retermed for something else, because for me, failure isn't failure, because I realize that if I fail at something, it's going to help me grow in the direction I want, right? If I hit a brick wall, I know that brick wall is there. I know what it feels like. I know the experience of the brick wall. And while I'm at the brick wall, I try to think and be alert and be aware of why I hit the brick wall so I don't do it again, and understanding how that fits into my life. And I feel like a lot of people are afraid to explore those things because they're so attached to, as Damon was saying earlier, people get really attached to their discomforts.
Yeah, I would definitely say that the label attachment is a huge issue. I mean, it's a great starting point. Ken and I are on the same page. Typology is a starting point. As far as I can read it, from Naranjo to Enneagram to Myers-Briggs Official, all the stuff says that you want to grow past where your starting point is, and you want to develop into your full potential. And yeah, I think type serves what it does, but I think a lot of us hobbyists have seen it as the end all, and it's like, this explains me, and I can just accept the fact that I am a rude jerk, and I'm good with that, And I mean this on a subconscious level. I hope that people aren't consciously thinking this, but I'm talking on a subconscious level that it really does. It does play a role. We attach to certain labels and identify ourselves with certain things that can be very problematic for a lot of people, and we associate with, I'm this way because that's the way it is. And that's why I don't really like the type compatibility stuff, because I feel it is very limiting. There's a lot of people out here who will go, I only date, ISFPs, or I only date ENTJs, or whatever mindset they have, And to me, that's not fair because a lot of those people are on their own journey, the people you're eliminating, who could very easily pass the profile bias and have developed into much more fulfilling human beings that can really enrich your experience of life. And, so my goal has always been to pass the profile of ENTJ and become much more of a full-rounded human being, and to really care about things that I used to be very weak in, and I have a very strong sense of conviction and passion and human ethics. Morality has been a very, very profound subject for me for a very long time, because it was a weak point, and I've always, wanted to enhance that. So when it comes down to it, and identifying the areas in which we struggle, I think it's important to recognize that we do tend to attach to these labels, and we need to remove these labels. With that being said, unless Jonathan has anything to add, I think it'd be a good time to take that break, Ken.
Yeah.
That you mentioned. Never happened.
Because of the way this is going, does anybody have the time right now?
Yeah, it's 4:19.
4:19.
Or my time, so that'd be 5.
Okay.
It's 5
So I think the way that this is going currently, I think what I might do is we're going to take the break, and then when we come back, we're going to cover the remaining topics, and then afterwards, anyone who wants to stay and continue to talk about this stuff, there'll just be free time to do that. So, that's how we're going to do. I'm going to hit end on this. Thank you for this, staying here with us for this part 1, and now we have Taylor with us. Wonderful. So, thanks for being with us for this part 1, and then we're going to take a hiatus, come back for part 2. Thanks for watching.